Is there something distinct and coherent that we can call American Islam? And if so, is it conservative, liberal, progressive, reactionary? Where do US Muslims stand on some of the big social and moral issues that Americans have been grappling with in recent years? On feminism and gender equality? How about same-sex marriage, legalized by the US Supreme Court in July and now backed by a majority of US voters? Do Muslim Americans themselves believe there's an inherent tension between traditional Islamic values and US liberal values? With me to debate these questions are Linda Sarsour, civil rights activist, executive director of the Arab American Association of New York, and one of the country's most vocal young Muslim American advocates, in the words of the New York Times, and Dr. Yasser Qazi, a leading American Muslim scholar, dean of the Al-Maghrib Institute, and a graduate of both Medina and Yale universities. Welcome to the arena, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Yasser Qazi, you're an American of Pakistani origin.
Yes.
Educated in the US, educated in Saudi Arabia. In your view, is there a distinct American Islam that we can speak of, that we can point to?
So there's no doubt that Muslims are living with distinct problems here in America, and those problems have unique solutions. If you want to call it American Islam, that term has its pros and cons. Personally, I would be averse to using something like American Islam or Canadian Islam or Mexican Islam. Nonetheless, there's an undeniable reality that American Muslims have unique circumstances. We have our own issues that we have to grapple with, and because of that, yes, there is going to be an expression of Islam that is unique for our time and place. Personally, I just don't like using the term American Islam. But inherently, yes, there is something that is unique to our time and place that Muslims are practicing in this land.
Linda, is that a phrase you like, American Islam?
I also don't agree with that phrase. I think Muslims in America are also not a monolith. We are conservative, traditional, progressive, liberal. We're Shia, we're Sunni, we're all types of Muslims. So I don't like this label of that there's a such thing as an American Islam.
Much of the debate, much of the hysteria in America about Islam and Muslims is to do with they're very different. They have different way of life, a different approach. In your view, Yasser Qazi, is there a clash between Western or American liberal secular values and traditional Islamic values?
There's not, the word clash is really harsh. There is the possibility of compatibility, and there is the potential for clash. But if both sides work for peace, if both sides agree for compromise, it is a very realistic and doable situation where even conservative Muslims can live and flourish and be a part of mainstream America. But there's no denying that the basic premise of Islam might be slightly different than the basic premise of liberalism.
Could you argue that there's a barrier towards Muslims integrating into American public life if American public life is defined around a set of values which Muslims don't necessarily share?
Well, even the term integration is somewhat ambiguous. I mean, are the Amish a part of the American framework? Are the ultra-Orthodox Jews of Brooklyn and New York a part of the American framework? So the term integration itself...
The Amish are what, 100,000, 200,000 people, living pretty much in isolation with no access to technology. Is that really the benchmark for the US Muslim experience?
I'm not talking about the benchmark.
Many would say that's not a very good model, if that's your model.
Oh no, I'm not talking about that as a model. I'm saying this notion that somehow you have to quote unquote integrate in order to be a part of America. I'm challenging that notion. That was what I was challenging.
We'll come back to what makes you American. Let me just ask Linda this question. You're associated with liberal causes, with liberal movements here in the US. Can you be both a card-carrying liberal and a practicing Muslim in America today?
I am a living example of a card-carrying liberal and a practicing Muslim in America, and it's not because I'm American, it's because I actually believe in the causes that I work towards that are social justice, that are the foundation of the religion that I practice of Islam, and being able to stand up for the most marginalized and most ostracized of our nation, which oftentimes also includes Muslims, is very dear and near and foundational to the Islam that I follow.
You have, here in America even, you have a lot of Muslim women complaining about how they're treated in the public space. There have been calls for women-only mosques. Some would say that's evidence that American Islam, or whatever phrase you want to give to describe Muslims in America, has the same issues of patriarchy, of misogyny, of gender inequality that other Muslim communities around the world share.
Well, so if you look at my track record, I would come in the middle here and I would say, look, there's no doubt there's a clear problem of the way women are treated in the masjids and the mosques, the fact that they're not given equal access, the fact that they're even told not to go to some mosques. So definitely I'm of those that are calling for some type of reform within the framework of Islam. But I personally am not going to go to the other side of saying there should be women-only mosques or whatnot. I think that's also exclusionary.
Look, the reality on the ground is, and we know this, and we're not having a theological debate, but Islam is a religion that empowers women. Let's put that out there. But the way it's Muslims and mostly Muslim men in our country here in the United States who are actually continuing to perpetuate some of the stereotypes that we have about Muslims. Women-only mosques are only being created because they don't find a role in the mosque to play. Let's look at the majority of mosques in America, Islamic institutions, majority male boards, if not only male boards, right? Issues that are impacting women, domestic violence, utter silence across the country on domestic violence in the American Muslim community, sexual assault in the Muslim community. We've watched scandals across the country. So I think for me, the question is, yes, there are problems, yes, there are solutions, but who's implementing them? This is something
again,
we need to
I
work towards.
would say that you need to look at individual track records. I myself have been extremely active in my own communities wherever I've been, and I think it's a living testament to the fact that every community that I have been a part of, definitely we have women on our boards. Our masjid is the most women-friendly, family-friendly masjid in our community. And I think that if you do a little bit of research, you will actually find most second-generation American clerics are actually supportive of these types of changes.
You're with the Al Maghrib Institute. How many women out of the, I think there are 19 instructors, how many women are there amongst the 19?
Right now we have one, and we are looking for
one out of
another.
19? Is that really?
But let me flip the situation around and say, is that because
18 and 1.
Is that because we are purposely hiring men only, or is that because the sad reality is, and this is beyond Al Maghrib or any institute, many women are not actually training in the Islamic sciences?
The question is, how are we doing that, right? So they're saying that we welcome it and not actually putting anything in place to make that happen. How are we encouraging young women in the Muslim community to become scholars and to be educated? How are we supporting and creating more institutions like Zaytuna College and others? And that's the thing. We talk a lot about the solutions, but the progress and the actual work. And I'm an activist, so I work. What are we doing to
Here's the irony,
happen?
Linda. Our institute, on average, we have 60 to 65% women attending our seminars. From the very beginning, we've always had a majority of sisters attending. If anything, we're the ones empowering women by giving them access to Islamic knowledge.
At those seminars, a lot of your critics would say, you've said stuff like, you said a woman should respect her husband's judgment even if he's wrong. Many people watching would say, that's not modern America, that's 1950s America. It's American, but it's a different era. To be honest, I don't know where
you're getting that particular clip from. And also, I myself have gone through a number of phases in my life, so I don't know when and where that particular...
It's a talk you gave recently, which is on YouTube, about what women should know about men, I believe, is the title of the talk. 250,000 people have watched it.
I mean, again, you're giving one particular quote.
That's not your view. That's not your view that women should.
I'm saying there's a more nuanced thing. In that very talk, I also talked about what men should do with, to respect their wives as well.
Well, let me make a broader point then. Across the discourse that you hear from Muslim leaders, community leaders, imams, etc., scholars, do you think the discourse gets it right on gender equality issues right now?
I think in 2015, we are still not getting it right. And I can tell you from across the country, including criticism of some of the scholars around issues of domestic violence, talking about sexual assault, and even going to the point of defending some folks who have been accused of sexual assault in the Muslim community. We've seen people come out in support. Not necessarily Dr. Qadi, but there have been others. And what it does is it pushes women out of the mosque. And I say, if there are no women in the mosque, there are no children in the mosque. So we have to think about, how do we create inclusive spaces? And the way you do that is by talking about the issues that are most dear to the women who are raising our children in our community.
Well, I agree with that, 100%.
You mentioned your talk on marriage. It was a talk on marriage. Of course, marriage in America is now extended to same-sex couples. It's now a constitutional right. A majority of Americans support same-sex marriage. A majority of Muslim Americans are opposed to same-sex marriage. Do you see that being a problem? We talked earlier about integration, not a word you like, but do you see that as a problem in your vision of coexistence between Muslim Americans and non-Muslim Americans, given that the values now on these issues seem to be so different, so far apart?
I don't necessarily see this as a problem. Once again, so American Muslims have the freedom to drink, to have premarital, extramarital intercourse. Does that mean they should engage in those freedoms? American Muslims have the freedom to take drugs in certain states now. It's all legal. Does that mean they should go and do that? So we've been battling with this issue of public freedom versus private morality from day one.
But especially in the West, where gay rights have become such an important issue, such an important right, in the last 10, 20 years, isn't there a danger that Muslims are therefore left behind and seen as the kind of the odd group in the corner who aren't on the same train in the same direction?
Well,
as
we're not
everyone
alone
else?
in this regard. A lot of, you're saying a majority of American Muslims feel a certain way. I would say other groups as well have certain ideas. And the fact that we don't agree with a Supreme Court ruling ethically and morally doesn't make us any less of American. Let me give you an example. What percentage of, let's say, Baptists or Christians don't approve of abortion? A very high percentage, 30 to 35%. Does that mean that they're un-American because they disagree with Roe versus Wade? So there's a difference between, look, we understand the legal system is going one way, but we have the personal and the private religious right to go another
Let
way.
me put that to Linda. You're an American Muslim civil rights activist. You campaign against Islamophobia and in favor of Muslim civil rights, but you also campaign against homophobia and in favor of LGBT rights. Do you see that as all part of the same struggle?
Absolutely, and I will say this about American Muslims. There has not been any coordinated campaign oppositional to the Supreme Court decision for same-sex marriage. This is a civil rights issue. We have no place as American Muslims targeted in the United States of America to oppose another marginalized group in this country, which includes LGBTQ communities. I think what the conversation around same-sex marriage opens in the Muslim community that we don't even have this conversation, is that we do have people in our community. We can't be like Ahmadinejad and say we don't have gay Muslims. We do have. How do we integrate them into a conversation? How do we create the spaces to bring them closer to Islam, for example? We need to make sure that everyone's included.
Well, let me put that point to Yasser.
Well, that's exactly what I've been doing, Linda. If you actually listen to the lectures that are on YouTube, I would say I'm one of the very few clerics that have very publicly said that people who have whatever personal issues that they have, whether it's same-sex, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, it's not our right to judge them. They are welcome in our communities. Would you tell him not to come to the masjid? You'd be happy. He's
You're
coming to the
comparing a
masjid.
gay Muslim to a
No,
drug
I'm
addict.
comparing a sin to a sin. I'm not comparing the person
But
to
it's
the
a
person.
sin in your view. If a gay Muslim comes to see you and says, I'm struggling with my sexuality,
if a
is he
person is having an affair, it's a sin. If a person is having a premarital intercourse, it's a sin. The theology of Islam is not going to change. Same-sex unions are an immoral issue. Whether the political freedom is given to them or not, I actually agree with Linda here, is that I understand the American government should not be in the job of policing morality.
But
that doesn't change
do you see how that's problematic for a lot of people listening who'll say, you say they're welcome in your mosque, but they're welcome as sinners, and that might make people not feel very welcome?
It's not our job to judge others. I'm willing to allow them their rights. Are they willing to allow me my rights?
When you say you're willing to allow them their rights,
Their political rights.
You
Their
support,
political
so you
rights.
support same-sex marriage?
I support the notion that the American government is not in charge of morality. Okay,
So you're not
that's a very
opposed to same-sex marriage?
politically, yes, but morally, I don't